Hillsborough County Commissioner Mariella Smith, thank you so much for joining us. Welcome to WMNF, and I'm glad you're here. Recently, the Hillsborough County Commission passed impact fee increases. Why did you increase impact fees?
Almost all the commissioners campaigned on the promise to make development pay its fair share of infrastructure. And impact fees are the way we do that. We charge developers a fee for every house or commercial development they build that goes to pay for just the capital costs of the infrastructure needed to support that development. So that includes schools, fire and police, sheriffs, as well as transportation, infrastructure, water and sewer, and parks. Some communities charge other impact fees as well for other pieces of the infrastructure, but that's our Hillsborough County ones.
What's been the history of how the impact fees have increased over the years? I take it that it's been a long time since there's been a major increase.
It has. In fact, the parks impact fees had not been increased since 1985. So 25 years. They were calculated in $1985, and a lot has changed since then. School impact fees were also woefully behind. The transportation impact fees were adjusted in 2016, but they were also, costs have risen dramatically for supplying, for building roads or providing transit since then. And they were, in 2016, they were set very low and included a schedule of phasing them in. So even in 2016, in a booming economy, booming building time, that Board of County Commissioners, before I got there, did not approve the impact fees at the full 100%, but only phased them in. So by 2019, we were just asking them to pay 80% of the costs that were determined back in 2016. So it's still very, very low.
What will the fees be used for?
So mobility fees can be used for roads as well as transit, but any kinds of transportation improvements. And school fees, as I said, impact fees can only be used for capital costs. So the school impact fees can be used only for building new schools, and they can only be used to serve the area where the development is occurring. And there's some state regulations on them where we collect them. They have to be provided there, so that it's truly the impact of that development that development is paying.
And some developers have decided that this is, that they want to take form PACs or something to fight against some of the commissioners who voted to put the impact fees on. What's your reaction to their response to the impact fee increase?
Well, right. They're just looking at this as business people and the cost of doing business, and they just don't want to pay. They never want to pay. One of my earliest experiences as a community activist 20 years ago was going to the county commission as a citizen in Ruskin and asking them not to create impact fee free zones in my area of South County where building was beginning to really boom, and the first housing boom was really taking off here, and yet developers were lobbying to pay no impact fees for it. So it's just a constant pressure that they always are pressing to lower their costs. But then if they don't pay, it's important to keep in mind, if the developers don't pay the costs, then either the taxpayers are stuck with the bill and we have to pay, or what has happened a lot is nobody pays because the taxpayers don't, the county budget doesn't have the money to provide it all. And so then that's how we end up in the severe gridlock, overcrowded schools, overcrowded roads. And in South County, the water system is so stressed because we haven't been keeping up with the costs of that infrastructure that people are actually suffering lower water pressure in their faucets because we haven't kept up with that infrastructure and developers haven't been paying their fair share.
Is there a chance that these higher impact fees could lead to less development, less quick development of this area and perhaps less sprawl?
That's what they threaten. The real point to me is if you have, and we have had, we did studies now this year, independent studies for each of these mobility fees. So we learned exactly how much each house costs for its own share of the infrastructure. How many seats per school does it need? How many lane miles of road does it need? And then what's the cost of that? So we know what the cost is. And it turned out that we needed to raise impact fees, many thousands of dollars on different kinds of development, not all of them the same, but a 2,000 square foot house, for example, we needed $13,000 more to cover the cost of the infrastructure for that house. Well, if they're not paying it, we are losing $13,000 on each house. Well, that's what we've been losing, $13,000 a house. I make the joke that you don't make that up in volume. If you're losing money on each house, it just ends up costing you more and more and digging us into the hole that we've been in with overcrowded streets, overcrowded schools, an overly stressed water system. Fire rescue response time has gone down. So you're having a heart attack in your house and the time it takes fire rescue to get to you is longer and longer because we haven't covered that infrastructure cost. So if the development can't be built and cover its own costs, well, then it can't be built. They're going to have to find a way to cover the costs.
Transitioning from impact fees, is there anything else that people should know about any other topics that are coming up at Hillsborough County Commission that people should keep their eyes on?
The next one we're going to do is water impact fees, and that's the last one. And I tell you, the pressure is very great. So that just now, as we passed higher impact fees for transportation and parks, we were unable to pass them without a phase-in structure. So we are having to still compromise on that and charge them starting in January, put them off a little bit, start in January, start at 80%. So, that's 20% on the taxpayers. So it's important that the commissioners hear from the public before that meeting on June 17th, that the public wants the developers paying their fair share of the water, because right now in South County, our water pressure is very, very low. It should be 80 to 85 pounds per square inch, and it is occasionally at high peak times dropping to 30 pounds per square inch. Now, PSI. Now, if that drops to 20, we're all on a boiled water notice in South County. And the fire hydrants stop working effectively. So the situation is dire. We need a new water facility that's going to cost $457 million, and we need the developers paying their share of that.
Well, Mariella Smith, thank you so much for coming on WMNF today.
Thank you.
All right, take care. Bye-bye.
Bye.